No style of songwriting is as dedicated to telling the lyric story as country, and specifically traditional country. You've got a style that grew out of the blues, and it meshes over into folk and influences the commercial country, the singer-songwriters, and everything else we hear today that depends on lyric to make the song go. So let's dive into what makes traditional country so special and provide the platform from which all this great lyric writing came from for decades to come. Now, I think what is so special about traditional country is that the characters are true to life. And generally, we see characters that are rough around the edges, that can tell about having gone to prison or being an alcoholic or ruining relationships and knowing that they'll do it again. We somehow connect with these characters because of their flaws, and we recognize that they're standing for the human condition. Artists like Dylan, Cash, Willie Nelson, Dolly Parton, Hank Williams, these people built the characters that are a true reflection of the culture from which they came. Now, every music that we listen to is generated from the culture. That's where it begins, and that's why we as songwriters are encouraged to put our own fingerprint, our own true experiences into our songs. Now, that doesn't mean we can't make up stories, but it does mean that the stories that we construct, that the things that we empathize with, and the feelings that we have that become people and characters within our songs, it doesn't mean that they have to exist. They can be pretend. But the idea is that they're expressions of our human condition. A hallmark characteristic of traditional country music is that we tend to have simple chord progressions. Now, there's this thing that we say, right, is country music is 3 chords and the truth. And there's a good reason for that. Think about it in terms of music is a reflection of character. Now, when you've got an artist like Townes Van Zandt or Willie Nelson, we often feel that what we're receiving from the singer, the experience that we're hearing them sing about, is true. It's grounded in nature. They're not abstract and metaphorical and sometimes talking about things that we can't quite understand. They're almost always grounded in their writing. And so their characters are true as living, breathing people. This then makes its way into the music, where the music might be a very clear expression of the 4 and the 5 and the 1. And it also might be major keys that are generally the 1 chord, the 4 chord, the 5 chord, the 6 minor, maybe the 2 minor, but nothing that's going to be particularly jarring or jagged or draw us out of the key in a really harmonically colorful way. This is by design because the music should make us feel like who the character is. And this is true across all the music that we write as we become who we are through the musical expression. It makes the lyric even more true. In traditional country, lyric is king. And so sometimes we'll find that the song prioritizes lyric story well beyond melody and exploration with harmony. And the way this happens is sometimes there will be verse after verse after verse after verse after verse, such as with Dylan's songs, and Townes Van Zandt also does this, because we need the space to tell the story. Other times, we'll find that the lyric is sort of producing a melody that is more of a vehicle for expressing the lyric rather than doing anything particularly interesting or distinct itself. So for da 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 might be a typical traditional country melody for a Townes-like artist, where it's not particularly important exactly which pitches he's singing and when, but it's more important that that melody is able to deliver the lyric. So it has to conform to the lyric's stress pattern. And that's another thing that can make traditional country a little more defined than, let's say, commercial pop, where sometimes we'll even hear artists misstress words in order to be expressive and dynamic. And sometimes that works really well, like in a Jagged Little Pill, Alanis Morissette kind of way. But in traditional country, you will rarely, if ever, hear an artist intentionally misstressing something, because the lyric and the story and the delivery and the conversational quality is so critical to our experience. Now, because traditional country is such a story-driven style, we end up sometimes with long spans in the song of the same thing occurring over and over and over. So what I mean by that is we get the same chord progression that might be just 4 chords or even 3, and then we get the same melodies over and over and over again. And I think this device actually helps us to really focus on what the melody is doing. Because when everything is changing in a song, the melody's changing, the chords are changing, even the harmonic rhythm changing, as well as the lyric, it's difficult for us to recognize what to focus on. And so when only one thing is growing and developing, and in this case the lyric, then we can follow that element. And as traditional country song stories unravel, we need to follow, because there's typically a few characters and there are events in the song that are happening that we need to be aware of. Now, this lyric quality of traditional country being more story-oriented means that many times in country music, time goes by. So what this means is a story is told, and that story is not about a sliver in time, but it's about an event that occurs over a few hours or days or years. This is different than the stories that we typically tell in commercial pop music, where we're really just more expressing a feeling and expressing a sliver of time that's around a topic, rather than telling people something that happened sequentially through time. This is what makes a story song a story, and that is what traditional country does. That's so different, sometimes even from commercial country of today. I think this sense of simplicity is a hallmark of traditional country music. Now, Johnny Cash does an amazing job of creating contrast in I Walk the Line just by changing keys. And you can hear him humming to find his new key and the root of that key in the song as he changes. But he starts in this key. Da, da, da. Now he repeats that again, da, 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 da. And then da, 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 ba, 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 ba. Do you hear all the repetition of the melody that's here? It makes the section beautifully simple. The characters are not trying to be difficult or elaborate or sophisticated. There's not a lot of tension except what is created by just moving from the 4 chord we want to resolve to the 1. But it's enough to give the character a little bit of nuance. And then he changes and moves down to there. So just these key changes within the song create change and contrast while maintaining simplicity. And I think this is some of the genius that is there in much of traditional country. Now, Willie Nelson wrote so many of the songs that we know and love, and this one is no different. He has beautiful repetition, but a little more emphasis on melody. Who doesn't recognize, right? And then he repeats that, right? The same idea, just transposed. Now, in the B section, here's where he really creates contrast. So a little different than a Townes Van Zandt, where you might have lots and lots of verses telling a story. This one expresses a feeling. And to do that, then he goes to this chord, which I'm playing this in the key of C, so this is an F major. Here's the new section. Worry, why do I let myself worry? Right, different form. And then wondering, what in the world did I do? And that gives him enough of a diversion, super simple still, but to come back to the melody that we all know and love. So simplicity is such a beautiful, graceful, smooth tool in traditional country that reflects, I think, the character that many traditional country songs assert. There's someone who's grounded, who's raw, who's not trying to put on any particular airs. And I think this is such a important characteristic of country music that is sometimes lost, in my opinion, in the polish and the elaborate nature of commercial country of today, that it becomes a different character. So if your aim is to have a few of those traditional country elements, you might allow yourself to involve some of those qualities of commercial pop and commercial country, which really means a strong, distinct melodic motif, repeat that melodic motif, and then remain simple with your chord progressions. And you might even use some of these songs as templates, which ultimately we do when we're just being influenced by great music. And then what we write is carrying some of the characteristics of that music. But you might intend on grabbing some chord progressions from these iconic songs and seeing if you can manipulate the melodies over top to come up with something just a little bit more new and you. But a hallmark of traditional country is that the lyric is seamless and it tells a story that's true to character and allows us to feel there with this concrete, literal, grounded, rough around the edges type of character who is telling us the truth. I hope you found this video useful. If you resonate with traditional country or want to bring a little bit more of that into your songwriting style. For more tips and tools on what makes each style of music unique in its writing, subscribe and come back to me in more videos. If you've dreamed of leveling up your writing in a community of other musicians and industry professionals, check out the EMC Institute. It is possible to level up your writing, balance your life, and do it all without breaking the bank. To learn more, click on the link and share with me your aspirations and goals with your music career.